This is the new 2024 Mercedes-Benz CLE 450, and it's a brand new model in the Mercedes-Benz lineup. The C-Class Coupe and Convertible are gone. The E-Class Coupe and Convertible are gone, replaced by the CLE for people who want something a little more sporty than a Mercedes four-door sedan. Today, I'm going to review this CLE 450 and show you all of its quirks and features. Today's video is sponsored by Cars and Bids, which is my online car auction website for modern enthusiast cars. So far, Cars and Bids has hosted more than 20,000 auctions of special, cool, exciting cars like this, and this, and this, and this. So, if you're looking to sell your enthusiast car, reach a wide audience at carsandbids.com. All right, time for the quirks and features of the Mercedes-Benz CLE. But first, a little overview. What is this car? A few years ago, Mercedes decided to pare down its model lineup, replace some cars that kind of duplicated other cars. Maybe there was too much product overlap, and that meant that there shouldn't be a C-Class Coupe and Convertible and an E-Class Coupe and Convertible. They were just too similar. So now those two cars have been combined into the CLE, which is a little bit closer in size to the C-Class. It's also fairly similar to the old school CLK that was sold from the late 90s to the late 2000s. That was a popular car at the time, replaced by the C and the E, and now it's back to just one model, the CLE. Now, like the C and E class that this is replacing, the CLE is offered as either a coupe or a convertible, and right now there are two models with more soon to follow. The entry-level version is the CLE 300. That's the base model here in North America with a turbo four-cylinder that makes 255 horsepower. This is the muscle car CLE 450. It has a turbo six-cylinder that makes 375 horsepower. Now, soon to come is the high-performance AMG CLE 53, which uses this same engine but tuned up for more power, about 440 horses. And although Mercedes hasn't yet announced it, presumably there will be a CLE 63, which will add an electric plug-in component and boost power to 670 horses, like the C63 and other 63 models. But for now, this is what you got. Pricing ranges from around $58,000 for a base level CLE 300 coupe, all the way into the 80s for the AMG CLE 53. And of course, this being the six-cylinder CLE 450, you have 6 lines on the plastic engine cover, just to let everybody know it's a six-cylinder. That's the universal symbol. The number of cylinders is equal to the number of lines on the plastic engine cover. Now, climb inside the new CLE and you quickly discover that basically everything in here is straight out of the Mercedes-Benz playbook, similar to other Mercedes-Benz models, but there are a few rather interesting quirks, starting with the door. The CLE is intended to really be a four-seat coupe. It doesn't just have back seats for show, they're supposed to be used. So the doors are quite large and quite heavy. One interesting result of that is, because the door is so long, you can't easily reach the seatbelt. So when you climb inside, the seatbelt is delivered to you electronically on this little carrier. Then you put the seatbelt on and the carrier electronically goes away, goes back into its home until it is needed again, which is an interesting strategy, a neat way to do it. Now, the other interesting thing that happens with the door, it's so big that it's kind of difficult to close, especially on a hill. You're trying to pull it closed, and especially in a tight parking spot. It's such a large door that opening it just a little way is kind of hard, and it's kind of difficult to get out. These doors really are quite large, which is just a general drawback of a coupe with 4 real seats. But anyway, once you climb inside, you discover, like I mentioned, the interior is similar to a lot of other Mercedes-Benz models, and frankly, that's a good thing. It is a beautiful interior, very nice, very high quality, well laid out, and excellent materials both to look at and touch all throughout. You also have this very attractive flat trim with this nice pinstriping that looks like a formal suit. It is just a generally attractive interior, very well laid out, very well made. Mercedes-Benz put a lot of thought into this interior because they use this same basic layout in a lot of different vehicles, the GLC, the GLE, the E-Class, the C-Class, and so they wanted to make one thing that was great, and they really did. It is a nice place to be in here, and there are some unusual quirks. For example, opening up the sunroof. You don't have a little switch you just press and it opens. Instead, you have a pad in the ceiling. You slide your finger, and then as you can see, the sunshade opens up, and you can stop it anywhere along there. Just tap again and it stops, and then slide back in the other direction and the sunshade goes the other way. And interestingly, the sunroof works the same way. If you want to open it up, once the sunshade is open, just slide your finger on the pad and the sunroof opens. You want to stop it, just tap the pad, and you want to move it forward, just slide your finger the other direction. Certainly unorthodox and quirky. And another interesting quirk in here, this little black pad in the center control stack is for fingerprint recognition. You can teach the car your fingerprint and have it save your memory settings tied to your fingerprint. And when you climb inside, instead of recognizing which key you're using, whatever, just press your fingerprint and the car will pull up your settings, which is pretty cool. Also, another interesting quirky touch is the climate control adjustment. When you lower the climate control temperature, the footwell temporarily turns blue, signifying colder air. When you raise the climate control temperature, it temporarily turns red, signifying warmer air. It's a little gimmick, but it's one that I think is kind of neat. Now, speaking of interior lighting coloring in here, you can change the ambient light color to basically anything you want, and it has a pretty big effect because ambient light is all throughout this interior, and the doors, the dashboard, even the climate vents have ambient light. So you can select exactly the color you want, as you can see here. And you can even choose a two-tone display, so parts are red and parts are blue, and you can even have the colors change as you drive along, fading from reds to blues to teals to pinks to whatever you want to see. It actually provides kind of a cool mood element inside this car. But anyways, since we're already getting into the infotainment screen, let's talk about the infotainment system. The latest version of Mercedes MBUX is absolutely fantastic, truly one of the very best infotainment systems in the industry. I love the home screen, which as you can see is right here. It's basically a map, but then there's a few little icons within the map that are selectable areas you can tap on to go to, like the radio or media or car settings or whatever you want. And if you need more settings, just press the home button and you get a different screen that comes up and shows all of your different icons and menus that you can go to. Everything about this system is very intuitive, very responsive, very easy to figure out, and it really is one of the best infotainment systems in the industry. I also love the camera situation in this car. For one thing, the cameras are tremendously high quality, as you can see here. Very high resolution, and they show a lot of different angles, including a 3D camera showing all around the car, which makes it really easy to maneuver it and park it in tight spaces. But I also like how easy it is to pull up the camera system. Say you're parking in some tight spot you want to see, you don't have to go deep into some menu or stick the car in reverse to get the backup camera to come on. Just tap on this little P with a camera and the camera system comes up immediately. Just a quick button press and there are all your cameras. Makes it very easy to see all around you with literally the quick push of a button. Now, the only real drawback to the MBUX system is it integrates all of your climate control functions, so you don't have physical buttons and dials and switches for climate controls, but they've done it fantastically. Your climate controls are still along the bottom and they're fixed in place. Even on the screen, they don't move. They're always in this spot, so you know exactly where your air temperature is, your airflow, recirculating, whatever you might want to turn on. It's all exactly in the same place all the time. Not quite as easy as feeling it with a button while you drive, but very close since it's always fixed there. And your heated and cooled air-cooled seats are not integrated into the screen. Instead, they're on the door panel like they always have been in Mercedes-Benz models. You have physical buttons for that, so you can just tap the heated seats, and you don't have to go into your infotainment system, which I consider to be a nice win. Now, the other big screen in this interior is the gauge cluster screen, which is also absolutely fantastic. I love the configurability of this screen. You can go to a sport display, which as you can see is, well, very sporty and high performance. Or you can choose a full screen map display, so you have your navigation map displayed directly in your line of sight as the driver. Or you can go to a classic traditional display with regular gauges and information in the center, and you can adjust the information to show basically whatever you want, including a smaller version of the map. So even if you select the classic display, you can still have your navigation map right in your line of sight. Just really a fantastic, well thought through system, except Mercedes-Benz models still do not have a next track button on the steering wheel, so you can easily change your stereo track or radio station or preset. It makes absolutely no sense. You have to tap in the screen right here to get to the next track, or you can have your music and media displayed in the center of the classic screen, and then you just slide your finger, swipe it over, and go to the next track. But the drawback there is you have to have your music displayed in the next screen for that to work. If you're on the map, your next track function no longer works on the steering wheel, and you gotta go into infotainment. It's crazy Mercedes is still doing this. Everyone else has an easily accessible next track button, but not Mercedes-Benz. Small potatoes. One other gripe actually about this car that I have is the rear view mirror is still a mirror. In most high-end luxury cars, the rear view mirror is becoming a camera, which makes it way easier to see out the back. And that's especially an issue in this car because as a coupe with a sloping roofline and rear seats that kind of sit up a little higher with their headrests, you don't get a lot of visibility in this car with the rear view mirror. A camera would make it a lot easier to see out the back, as a lot of other automakers are finding out. It's a shame Mercedes-Benz hasn't implemented that on any of their newest products except the 4x4 squared G-Wagon. I'd like to see it get a little bit more mainstream. But anyway, next up, since we're talking about the back seat, let's discuss what's going on back there. Like I mentioned before, the back seat in this car is intended to be used. Sparingly, probably, but you're supposed to be putting people back there. This isn't some two-seat car they've added a very small back seat to make it a little more practical. You do have a legitimately sized back seat. So you also have some decent amenities back there. You have climate vents specifically for your rear seat passengers. You have in the center cup holders, as you can see, for rear passengers to store their drinks. And you even have a nice little speaker mounted on the sides next to the seats to enhance their listening experience. As you can see, only 2 seats in back. There's no center seat in the middle, so this is a 4-seater. And the seats aren't huge, but they're bigger than what you'd find in smaller cars like the Mercedes SL, the Porsche 911, which just barely have back seats. And of course, if you get the convertible version of the CLE, the back seats will have more headroom once the convertible top is down, giving rear passengers even more space than what you get in the coupe. And finally, we move outside the new Mercedes-Benz CLE, and first we take a look at the exterior design, which frankly looks pretty nice. It's an understated, subtle, but very attractive car. It's not quite as beautiful or distinctive as the Mercedes CLK was, in my opinion, especially the second-gen CLK. I always thought it looked really, really nice with that pillarless design. This is more derivative of the standard Mercedes-Benz models available right now, just sort of in coupe form. But most new Mercedes are pretty nice looking, and this one is too. It's an attractive design, it looks nice, and I think that's gonna have a positive effect for them selling these things. Now, in terms of exterior quirks, probably the quirkiest is the front grille. You look at it from far away and it just looks like a fairly traditional front grille, but you start to get closer and you notice that the little trim in the center is tiny Mercedes-Benz logos just repeated over and over again in the front grille, which is a wonderful quirk that you only notice if you're really looking for it. And speaking of the Mercedes-Benz logo, another cool trick, this time in back, you'll notice there's no immediately obvious trunk handle back here. Well, that's because opening up the trunk is done with the Mercedes-Benz logo. You push the top of the logo and then it lifts up automatically. Take another look at that. Push it and it automatically raises, giving you access to your trunk, which is a pretty nifty little quirk. But anyway, once you're inside the trunk, a few things to note in here. For one, it's quite spacious, particularly for a two-door car where practicality isn't necessarily the biggest focus. You actually do have a pretty good amount of room back here, and there's more. On the side, behind this netting, you have more space for smaller items if you don't want them rolling around. You can lift up the floor, and there's even more space under there, also for smaller items you might not want in the full trunk. And you have a cool hidden hook on the ceiling of the trunk. You can pull it down here and you can see there's a hook. This is for your grocery bags. If you're transporting something breakable and you'd rather hook it in place than have it flying around in the turns, that's where you can do it, on that little quirky hidden trunk hook, to add even more practicality. But anyway, since we're on the subject of flying around in the turns, curious to see how the CLE 450 handles on the road, so it's time to get behind the wheel and take it for a drive. All right, driving the CLE 450, the continuing legal education. This is an interesting car. Mercedes has decided to pare down its lineup and not have so many vehicles, especially coupe sedans, that sort of thing. So we get the CLE replacing both the C-Class and the E-Class. And I gotta say, this particular version drives quite well. The engine is absolutely fantastic. This is the same powertrain that I have in my daily driver car, which is an E450. It's a slightly, this is a slightly more powerful, slightly tweaked version of that engine, but basically the same. And so I'm already kind of an expert in it. I had 20,000 miles in that car, and I love this powertrain. I think it's just tremendously potent, responsive, quick, smooth. It is a 6-cylinder engine that truly approximates the acceleration of a V8 and the fuel economy of like a very efficient 6-cylinder engine. I have always loved this powertrain ever since it first came out, and I really think it's a very, very, very impressive engine. And it works great in this car as well. This car, you know, is supposed to be sportier, more exciting, more aggressive. It's actually a pretty sporty powertrain. Even though I have it in my station wagon, it is fairly aggressive. If you put it in sport mode as I have it now and like really get on the throttle, you get great response. You get long drawn out revs that really get up into the power band and move the car quickly. Let's talk about ride quality. Nice and smooth in here. These Mercedes-Benz coupes have always done a good job of kind of combining a reasonably sporty experience with also a reasonably luxury experience. They're not quite as engaging, I would say, as the BMW 4 Series, although as that car has gotten sort of larger and more luxury oriented over the years, it's lost some of its engagement advantage over cars like the CLE. And so this is reasonably strong, and it does seem to steer and handle quite well, but this one does a nice job of really kind of feeling like a sporty car. The steering and handling is relatively quick, it's very predictable, and it has a fairly small size, not a lot of body roll, and it does seem to move fairly quickly through turns in like a predictable, relatively agile manner that I wasn't necessarily expecting from this car, especially being a non-AMG model. Now, with that said, there are some drawbacks. It's a good powertrain. It's a relatively quick and sporty handling, but it's not a sports car. And I think that people who buy this thinking they're getting like a real sporty car, like you will be disappointed. That's not really the purpose of this vehicle. It's just supposed to bring like a little bit of sport into the lives of people who, you know, maybe their kids have gone off to school or whatever. They're driving around Palm Springs or something like that. And they want, you know, just something a little more engaging and exciting for the last period of their lives. The hotter versions of this car, the 53 and the 63 models, will find younger buyers, but I have a suspicion that this car will mostly be sort of for kind of the older crowd who doesn't want the performance capabilities, performance level of an AMG GT or an SL or even a BMW 4 Series or M4. Overall, though, the thing about this car, and the thing that really impresses me with a lot of the modern Mercedes-Benz models that I get in, is that they're just such overall encompassing excellent cars, just in totality. We have fantastic technology, we have a comfortable driving experience, very quiet in here. You have a nice interior, it looks good, it's well laid out, the materials are very nice. You have a good, smooth engine with good power and fuel economy. I have a suspicion that when we look back on Mercedes-Benz, we will look at this era as one of its better eras, just like a lot of us look at sort of the mid-90s as a time that Mercedes was making some very special, really well thought out cars. I think this era has gone back to that. The designs have become more restrained, more classically attractive, and just the overall feel, driving experience, look, technology. The cars are just really great. And this is a good example of that, albeit one with a more niche market segment, because at the end of the day, you know, a luxury coupe is not exactly the most popular car. But if you're interested in this kind of segment, I mean, this is a very, very competent car, just like so many modern Mercedes-Benz models. And so that's the new 2024 Mercedes-Benz CLE 450. This is an attractive car with a nice design, a good powertrain, and a high-tech, luxurious interior. And even as demand for coupes has started to slow down, I suspect this car will be relatively a success, because Mercedes-Benz has always done well in this segment. Anyway, now it's time to give the new CLE 450 a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 59 out of 100, which puts the CLE 450 here. It looks like this is a low spot, but the truth is most of these competitors are performance cars, which the CLE isn't, mainly because there aren't many non-performance choices that rival the CLE. The closest rival is the BMW M440i, which is only slightly less comfortable, but simply more engaging and exciting to drive, earning it a higher DougScore. In fact, even the new E450 sedan ranks higher than the CLE 450, as it offers similar performance but more practicality. The CLE is a nice car, surprisingly so, but it's a niche model for a relatively small audience.